over now to Alex, who has joined our stages in London, Berlin, and New York, and now digitally. And I'm going to hand him over now. So please give him and Christina a big virtual welcome to the Business of Apps live stage. Over to you.
Thank you so much, James. Yeah, it is a bit of change of scenery, typically from your existing conferences, but I love digital. It gets me the opportunity to chat with Christina as well, which is harder to organize in real life. So Christina, thank you so much for joining. And I'd love for you to quickly introduce yourself and share with the rest of the world who you are, what you work on, and we can take it from there.
Yes, of course. Hey, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks, James and Alexei, for inviting me. I'm Christina, and I'm one of the growth leads at Product Madness. Product Madness is a social apps developer. We're focusing mainly on social casino, actually. And I'm within the growth team. I'm focusing on retargeting. I've been in the gaming industry approximately 11 years, or just a little bit more than that. And before moving to growth, I've been working in different CRM roles between Malta and London.
Awesome. And indeed, it's been great to chat with you about these topics, because you've been on both, CRM, you've been on the retargeting side, and there's a lot of questions and topics that we want to cover in those two areas. So very excited to speak with you today. And I'll give a brief intro about myself as well. So I'm Alexei. I'm the US Managing Director for Addictive. We help app developers increase their retention and revenue through retargeting campaigns and predictive analytics. I'm based in Sausalito, actually. So luckily it's sunny and warm in here. And I'm excited to dive in. With that being said, the one thing that really helps us for everyone who's listening and watching is there's a poll on the bottom right of the screen with 2 questions. It really helps us to understand who's in the audience, who's listening. And if you go in there, you'll see we'd love to know if you're already running retargeting campaigns and if you're, how broken is your setup with iOS 14.5. What we want to discuss today is really what are the changes, how are things done today in a retargeting world, and what are the options for the world of tomorrow. So the polls help us figure out and understand who's in the audience and how to shape our questions and answers. And as James pointed out, please address any questions in the chat, and we will make sure to address them right away or towards the end of the chat. And I think we can start. The way we structure this is we have asked a lot of our customers what their top topics are, and we'll address a few of the most important ones. And to start, I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. So what we define as retargeting is you have users in your app. You want to show them ads while they're using other apps, and you want those ads to bring them back inside your app or your portfolio of app. Typically, this is done on Facebook, on Google, on programmatic, and you really want to optimize for users that are higher, like LTV, if you have paying apps, or users that have opportunities to be driving high CPMs if you're ad driven. And this is the challenge that comes along is iOS 14.5 removes the IDFA availability for a lot of users who don't give their consent. And the challenge is, how do we continue in this world of retargeting post iOS 14.5? So with that, I'd love to hear a little bit about what you guys are doing over at Product Madness, Christina, and I'd love to understand, what is the #1 goal for Product Madness when you run retargeting campaigns today?
Yeah, of course. Our main goal used to be direct ROAS, which is, I think, a very popular metric within the industry. And I believe it really works perfectly as a main KPI for you as such. However, I feel that it can be quite misleading and influenced easily by the targeting strategies that you run via your paid retargeting activities. So what I mean by this is naturally when you retarget more recently active users, your ROAS will look incredible in some cases because re-engaging and retargeting users will be cheaper who are more recently active than those who churned ages ago. And besides, the likelihood of these users making payment is also greater. So when you simply look at the revenue from these users against your spend, you're going to have a very positive picture, but potentially you end up having a misleading picture as well, since you don't know that if these users would have come back without your ads. So we shifted the focus in the past year and a half, and now we are focusing instead on incrementality and to understand whether these users who we brought back via paid retargeting activities are giving us a positive incremental uplift in terms of activity, spends, revenue, etc. So we're really trying to look at an uplift and profitability. And in order to do this, we apply control groups against each of the strategies and look at the combination of the metrics depending on the segment or what we want to achieve.
That's awesome, and indeed, there's been a lot of work around incrementality, and I think that the world is getting to a point where it's even more important within iOS 14.5 world. But I think it's fascinating the work that you've put in, you, Marvin, and the team to really establish a baseline that we can compare against, and then really measure the delta there. We encourage a lot of app developers to measure incrementality and to really work off, not necessarily from a ROAS perspective. One thing I'll add is I think that especially in your case, incrementality was critical in your retargeting strategy. I think where maybe the setup can be simple is if we target long lapsed users who are likely not to come back anyways, then I'd say potentially there's a way for ROAS to make sense. If we're looking at lapsed 90 days, lapsed 180 days users, but for more recent users, just like Product Madness is setting up and trying to retarget, incrementality is really key in that measurement.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. It's also a tricky one, of course, because it's not so easy to set it up. So it also depends on your capabilities. As you mentioned, thank God I have a great partner in crime, Marvin, who is in our data science team, and he's an immense support for our activities and to be able to run all these incrementality analysis.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so this will segue into the second topic I want to cover. You mentioned that Product Madness is targeting users early enough in the funnel, and this is why incrementality is such a big topic for Product Madness and for you. And typically, a lot of our partners are seeing an overlap between the CRM teams and the retargeting teams. So I would love to, for you to share how. What is the perfect plan for you? What is the perfect picture when it comes to having CRM teams and retargeting teams working together?
Yeah, so just to add a quick note there, we're not targeting so early yet. I will touch on that a little bit later, but we wanted to establish the incrementality in order to also be able to do that. So kind of to have the measurement framework in place. And just to go back to actually this question, in my opinion, yes, CRM and paid retargeting should really run hand in hand, so to say, and the two teams should be working really closely together in an ideal world, but in reality, of course, it's not always the case, and it's not so simple. CRM activities are also different from paid retargeting, right? So the channels are different. So we're talking about email and push notifications, which can be highly personalized. Not to mention that these are actually free, so to say. So I believe that we should try and exhaust these communication channels first. However, we have to keep it in mind that not all of the users will allow these communications. So in our case, just to give an example, we have actually less than 50% of the user base who allows communications via email and push, or either one or both. So when you separate,
I'm losing Christine a little bit. I don't know if it's on my end. So let's ask if others are hearing Christina or not. We got cut off a little bit, and you're back on.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Oh,
All good.
It's the new era of digital.
Exactly.
So where did I cut off?
You were mentioning. I think it's you're better off if you restart, or really you'd say in a perfect world, CRM and retargeting work hand in hand, but it's not a perfect world, and then got cut off a little bit.
Exactly. So of course it's not a perfect world, but ideally you would want these activities to go hand in hand. And I don't know if I was talking about the channels. Did you still hear that? Okay, cool. So yeah, as I mentioned, these are different channels. They also can be personalized, and they are free. So I think I believe that they should definitely be part of the retargeting activities. But we have to keep it in mind that not everyone allows communication via these channels. In our case, the user base who allows communications via email, push, and so on is less than 50%. So you want to make sure that you don't miss out on a chunk of the users who don't allow, and therefore on some lower hanging fruits. So what I would like to achieve at some point in an ideal world, we can call it my vision or whatever, because I have to admit, unfortunately, we are not there yet, is a well-coordinated overall user journey supported by both CRM and paid activities, where the user would enter a reactivation flow, for example, where they would be targeted by push and then email, or push and email, depending on the opt-in. And depending on if the desired outcome is not achieved by these free communication channels, they would be moved into paid retargeting, basically. On the other hand, though, the users that we know, and we should really aim to know who is not contactable via these channels, we should start targeting them with paid activities when they are at the risk of churn straight away, because we don't want to miss out on them. So this is the way I see that it should work in an ideal world. But of course, to implement it and also make sure that it's measurable, especially if we talk about incrementality and so on, it's quite complex. And if you want to take it to another level, and you have enough user base, depending on your product or the segments, you could even take this to the next level, where you test the different options. So when you do only email and push, right? Most companies start with that because it's also cheaper, and then test email, push, and paid retargeting, or email and retargeting only, and so on. So to kind of test these different options against each other and see what works best for your business and what's the most profitable. But it's quite a piece of work.
It is a lot of work, and I think so some advertisers have implemented this. And I spoke to Jacques, who I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say his full name. So those of you that know Jacques will recognize his strategy. But indeed, some advertisers have started to implement full-on strategies with a mixture of email and retargeting and push with the full journey. But it does take a lot of work to set up. It is more complex to measure, and ultimately, it seems like we're getting there after, that we're going to get there at some point, but the complexity is high. And, one thing you touched upon that I'd love to dig a little bit more is, that you'd love the user journey to be optimized based on push, email, and retargeting. When do you start your retargeting journey, and when do you consider that there's a good enough time for them before you retarget them?
So when to start retargeting, I think it's something that it can be quite different depending on your app or on your product and the segments. So if you want to target, I don't know, users, or you have a product where the user base is very active, and you have a segment where you know that these users are a daily returning users, for example, then you will have a red flag after just like a couple of days of inactivity, and you probably want to start retargeting. In other products, for example, that's the users are more periodically returning to your product, you can have a more relaxed approach. So in our case, we have a bit of both, but we've been quite conservative in our approach so far, because we really wanted to establish the measurement framework, and we've been kind of reviewing if ROAS is the right way to measure and so on. So we've been really focusing on the lapsing and the churned segments more than upsell or an earlier recency of targeting. So having said that, we actually just finalized a new testing strategy for our paying users on Android, of course, because this is where you can keep playing around and rely on your segments and so on. We just finalized that, and we are rolling this out now in June across our 3 main apps. And in some of these cases, the activity will start just after a few days of inactivity, which we haven't done a lot in the past. But in all cases, all the campaigns and all the strategies will be measured by cost per engagement, but also supported by incrementality, because we really want to make sure that we're not cannibalizing these users, which usually is one of the big question marks or worry from product and CRM side, of course, if those users would have come back otherwise.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, that's a topic that we always discuss with every single launch, every single partner is, what is too early? And this is where definitely incrementality helps a lot, of course. And we're going to see how we can, find solutions in the post iOS 14.5 world. But a lot of our customers are starting to target within 0 to 7 days, and which is very early. It could be considered very early for a funnel of retargeting. But at the same time, we've noticed that if you wait too long of a time, if you wait too long before retargeting them, they're long gone by that time, and it's incrementally harder, no pun intended, to bring those users back if they've left the app for too long. They've forgotten what the app is all about, and they've lost momentum. And there's a sweet spot there, where if you target too early, it won't be incremental. If you target too late, it'll be very incremental, but very hard to bring them back. And the sweet spot is somewhere in between. And it's a very tough question to answer universally, but it's great to hear that you guys are looking at that from, okay, let's try to find that sweet spot. Let's push the boundaries and see how far you can take it, or how early you can take it without utilizing incrementality.
To be fair, I think if you start at an earlier level or an earlier recency, it could also be that your incremental uplift in terms of revenue might actually be higher, because obviously these users are more active. So you might be cannibalizing a bigger percentage of the users that would have came back. But if you manage to achieve that sort of incrementality that makes it worth running these strategies, then it's great. But I think our approach was really just, we wanted to make sure that we have the measurement framework in place before we would even test these approaches, because we're talking about quite a significant spend on these activities.
Makes sense. There's one topic that I really want to cover. We hear a lot about contextual retargeting, and targeting and retargeting in general. I really wanted to cover that, and we have the next three and the last 3 points that we want to cover are all sort of geared towards an iOS 14.5 world, and just as context. Again, no pun intended. So contextual targeting is the ability for a partner to target users, to decide who to target based on shared variables that are shared with other users. So for example, if you know that your users are reading the New York Times every day at 8 p.m., then showing an ad on the New York Times at 8 p.m. is not targeting your users specifically, but the likelihood that your potential users are on New York Times at 8 p.m. is higher, and therefore helps with a better targeting strategy. And obviously that's just one variable. I took the publisher as a variable. Actually, I took 2, the publisher and the time of the day. It could be a lot of different variables there that are not user specific, but that help figure out, am I targeting the right persona? Am I targeting the correct audience type? And if so, that will increase my conversion rate, my LTV, my retention, and so on from that cohort. So we hear a lot about contextual targeting, and even more so about contextual retargeting, to try to help find users of existing users of an app, and trying to find them based on these contextual elements. And personally, we're measuring things to see how it plays out. Does it really work? It's all a matter of accuracy, right? So if you get enough if you put the bar high enough, then you end up with a good enough campaign, and you actually end up with a good retargeting strategy. The difficulty is reaching an accuracy rate that's high enough that justifies the cost. And one element that we've found was helpful is, or at least to factor in, is if you have the ability to find your users, typically they're on this app at certain time of the day. If you're ready to pay lower, it sort of balances out the inaccuracy, because of course you're going to target your existing users, but you're also going to target users that are brand new. And it kind of begs the question, is retargeting moving into a blend of UA and retargeting, or a sort of inefficient retargeting, but when you reduce the cost of acquisition, it takes that into account, and ultimately you can keep retargeting your users. A lot of our partners that we've asked this question to, it's a big question mark. So I obviously, no one has the answer currently, because it's all work in progress. What do you think about all sort of this topic in general?
Yeah, so I like to call it more contextual targeting than retargeting, because as you said, it's more like based on historical data, go on to the publishers where we know that our users are most likely to be online at a certain time, and so on. So because of that, I really see retargeting and UA blending together on iOS because of this. Having said that, I think we would like to give it a try, and we are definitely open to test this, since there aren't so many options out there at the moment, even though we're trying to think outside the box, but there is quite a few walls that we're facing. My concern a little bit about this is that obviously I work in a certain genre, right? So if we know that our players can be found on New York Times or wherever at a certain time of the day, very likely that some of our competitors, or most of our competitors' users, will have a similar persona, right? So their users will also be found at the same publishers at the similar times. So this can make it pretty expensive, I believe. And since the measurement is not really easy, or it's not there, I have some question marks, but I would like to give it a try.
Okay, and I think that's you're in a similar spot as a lot of us out there,
we all
and trying to figure out how we're gonna play with iOS 14.5 data. So I want to want to bring up, there's two elements that we haven't covered. One is idea V matching, and then the other one is cross promo retargeting. So I want to briefly, since the topic at hand is how do we handle retargeting campaigns in the iOS 14.5 world, it's interesting to cover the topic of idea V and how to use that to retarget. But I think I want to come back to that maybe later on or on another topic, because I really want to focus on cross promo retargeting and essentially how can advertisers leverage their existing portfolio, and this is something that's very actionable. So maybe again for context for everyone, because the terminology is important here. Cross promo can be external cross promotion. So you ask a partner, you go to see a retargeting partner or UA partner, you give them a list of your users, and you ask them, here are the users of my app A. So let's take your example, Christina. So you the main three apps, you have Hearts of Vegas, and let's say Cashman Casino. You would send users from Hearts of Vegas, as a list of the users from Hearts of Vegas. You would send them to a partner such as ourselves, and we would find them on New York Times, on other apps out there. And when we show an ad to them, this time we don't try to drive them back to Hearts of Vegas. We try to drive them to to Cashman Casino, for example. And this is one scenario of cross promotion that's done on external inventory. The most common thing people hear when they hear cross promo, what they think about is, well, I have inventory, you have Hearts of Vegas, you have Lightning Link, you have Cashman Casino, you have your own inventory, and you can do cross promo yourself on your own inventory for essentially, it could be free if you're doing it on remnant inventory, or it could be at the expense of not showing a paid ad. So someone else could have shown an ad and paid you guys for it, but you decided to instead show an ad yourself. And typically what we see is, and we've done a lot of cross promotion together, and what we've seen is that a lot of partners this cross promotion action is becoming very critical. And actually, we surveyed our customers that own multiple apps on how do they rank this cross promotion priority now that iOS 14.5 is out. And so almost 80%, basically 78% of our customers that own multiple apps have put cross promotion as an OKR in their business, which is fascinating, because a year ago, cross promotion is basically, yes, whatever remnant inventory we have, unsold inventory we have, we'll just show an ad for our existing apps. What do you, how do you think cross promo will evolve in a iOS 14.5 world, and what can you tell the audience about how you're thinking about this, and how to better leverage, how to transition from a retargeting on external inventory to retargeting and cross promo on your own inventory?
Yeah, sure. So as you said, there is the external and the internal part. So we've done a couple of campaigns with you guys actually on the external cross promo. But it's really complex, and I think again the question of the cannibalization is massive there as well. So you obviously, if you're talking about like churn users, it's less of a worry, but to measure the success is really complex. So to be very transparent, when we were running these activities, it was also the time for us when we were really focusing on just establishing the right measurement for retargeting, and that was the priority. So since we didn't see like great and obvious success, we paused these activities and we decided to come back to it at a later stage when we have more headcounts as well, and kind of like more time on our hand to really dig deeper into this topic. So at the moment, we're not running these anymore, the external part. I do agree though that in the post-IDFA world, it will become more important, and I think it's something that everyone should at least test. So what I really believe in is the internal part, because as you said as well, it's quite straightforward. It's free, so to say. And if you have some attributes that you can use, or some even more sophisticated support, as I mentioned already, the data science team earlier, we have a couple of data science models as well that can support us with this approach. So we have something called our churn score, for example, that is built using lots of different attributes and touch point through the user journey. So it's something that we can use in order to decide who are the users that we want to show an ad, for example, in Heart of Vegas from Cashman Casino. So at the point of a certain churn score, when we know obviously it represents different percentage of likeliness of churn and other things, but we can establish when we want this to happen and start the cross promote internally, basically. So again, we not running this yet, just because we want to make sure that we will tackle it the right way when we started.
Yeah, I mean that's fascinating, and that's really where we think the world is going to go as well. I think what you're doing internally, you're lucky that you have a data science team that's there.
Definitely.
And I think a lot of partners they do have a data science team. There's sometimes no bandwidth. It's a long and hard project, and ultimately, if you break that down into a few parts, to be able to do this successfully, you really need to predict essentially the LTV of this user on that other app. Since you want to try to find users that are higher value, you want to find users that are probably going to churn on the current app, since you don't necessarily want to move away your whales or your top spenders and break that experience and push them away from your app. So you want to be able to predict LTV, you want to be able to predict churn, and then you want to be able to see also if there's if that other app makes sense even for that particular user.
Yeah.
If you're trying to push an app that has nothing to do with the user, if you think that the affinity is quite low, then obviously that's not going to be optimized as well. And then you also have to measure what missed opportunity there is compared to showing them an ad that someone pays you to show from an external one. So there's a lot of factors in there, and I think it's going to take time to get there. If every company wants to do it individually, what do you think? What do you think on your end between those four things? The affinity to the other apps, the LTV, the churn. On a scale of 1 to 10, what would you say the most important factor is in your opinion among these four variables?
I mean, the affinity, since the three main apps that we were mentioning and we work with, it's all social casino, so it's quite relevant. So we don't have an issue there. I think the predicted LTV is probably the one that would have the biggest weight, because of course we all work towards revenue at the end of the day. So the predicted LTV, I would say, is the top on the list. And if you can work with something of a predicted LTV on a network level or something like that, that would be the next level, because the main goal with these cross promotions really is to keep your users in your network, rather than, as you said, show another ad from competitor or some other genre.
Okay. Okay, we have a lot of work to do, and that's exactly the topics we're working on. But obviously, every partner individually is working on these products. Every app developer is working on these or trying to work on these internal solutions when they have the bandwidth and so on. And we're definitely hoping that we can help a lot of partners as well in that area. So I think if we were to wrap up as well, just keeping being conscious of time for everyone in the room. There are a lot of different areas we can go into, but really, if we think about retargeting in an iOS 14.5 world, we see contextual targeting, to name your methodology, contextual targeting for iOS 14.5. We didn't address IDFB, IDFA, but there is certain creative solutions there to try to help keep the retargeting campaigns going. Right now, the opt-in rate is quite low. The adoption rate of iOS 13.5 is quite low. So what I would recommend for everyone in the room is to try to measure as much as possible right now while you still have data on iOS, because at some point, it's going to grow the adoption rate on iOS 14.5, and ultimately we're going to have new devices coming in end of year. And when they do, the adoption rate is going to go much higher, obviously, since they're going to all be shipped with the new OS version. So I want to take a pause and wrap up here. And if anyone has any questions, I'd love to see that. Actually, I see one from Joe. What additional cost per re-engagement or eventually expect with retargeting in the new environment? How much more expensive is it to retarget? Thanks, Joe, for the question. Actually, I think I can take this one very simply. The issue, retargeting in general has always been, we can afford to bid higher because we know a lot about the user. So typically, it's not necessarily a price point issue. Really, in this case, it's a match rate or reach issue. It's, are we able to find that user when they're using other apps? And right now, the answer is still yes, because the adoption rate is still low. But it may not be the case in 6 months' time. And so, if we think about it, cost per engagement, right now, all of our campaigns are still running at the similar cost per engagement. But this will change in 6 months, and not so much in price, but in volumes. And then kind of Priya is asking, what are the ways to retarget users on Facebook? If you go, Christina, I mean, maybe you want to add something in there, and then I'm happy to look back at.
So I wonder if the question is specifically for iOS 14.5 plus or in general. But really, I think with Facebook retargeting as well, if we're talking about iOS, it's a big challenge. So I don't really have a solution here yet. For now we keep running the iOS campaigns as they were, and we're trying to monitor and understand what is the percentage of users that we can still find, how is the performance changing, and in the meantime, with all the solutions that are out there, trying to find the best way going forward.
Awesome, thank you, Christina. Then another question for you: what skills do marketers need now to manage retargeting campaigns? You mentioned you have a data science team now and so on.
Yes, unfortunately, I think I have to say data is really everything, right? So you need to know who are the users you want to retarget, and at what point you want to retarget them, because there are different strategies. So you might want to retarget your non-payer users as well, in fact, for DAU purposes, and to have higher engagement in your games and so on. But for payers, for example, and for profitability, you really want to know what is the segment that you want to go after. And obviously, this is the biggest challenge with iOS 14, because we're just not going to, we're not able to go after those users all the time.
That's exactly what I would have said. I couldn't have said it better. The last question coming in from, I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce the name properly, so I'm sorry if I mispronounce. I want to say Jacob or somewhere around those lines. Have you tried to retarget non-payers and offer them special offers to convert them to paying users?
Okay, so yeah, actually, as I just mentioned, yeah, we also do retarget non-payers, but of course the objective with these campaigns is not incremental revenue. Sometimes you get a surprise and there is some additional revenue as well. But the purpose of these campaigns is really to maintain DAU, to have the health of the app, really. But also with the CRM team, if you're working together, you can make sure that when these users are brought back, they are targeted with special live ops events, or they fall into a different life cycle. And another thing we do is also to work together with the ad monetization manager and team, so that when you bring back non-payers, you want to make sure that you try and monetize them through ad monetization as well, if that's something that you're running otherwise.
Yeah, and since this is the last question, I want to add one quick thing. Is it's very hard, and it's just to emphasize really what Christina said. It's very hard to convert non-payers into payers, and we have advertisers coming to us and telling us, hey, we have these bunch of non-payers, we'd like them to pay. It's very hard to do that. And so if as Christina pointed out, if you have DAU goals, or if you need people in the audience to be able to drive on social media, on or competitions in the app, or whatever that may be, now that's a great reason to retarget non-payers. Or if you're able to arbitrage with retargeting them cheaper than what you're getting off ad revenue from them, that's a great way to do that. But expecting non-payers to convert into payers is extremely hard, and it's very incremental, because they wouldn't have purchased on their own. It's very incremental, but it's not the most efficient way to run a campaign for most apps. There are some exceptions, but for most apps, that's really a difficulty.
Yeah, and just one thing I wanted to add here as well, that if you can retarget your non-payers at a cheap cost, it's still for engagement and DAU purposes, not for revenue, but it can be really worth it, because if you just think about how expensive it is to have a new install, and you don't know if that user will be a payer or a non-payer. And usually we can pay anything between like $10 to $25. And if you can retarget a non-payer for like $1.50, it's still worth it, because it will most likely be incremental.
Awesome. And this is the last question, and I think we can wrap it up here. And I want to thank everyone for joining. We have a lot of people on the webinar. I want to really thank Christina. I want to thank you for the time you took today. I want to thank James as well for, as always, organizing conferences around the world, and now on the digital world. So maybe James, I can pass the mic back to you.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you guys, and thank you everyone for showing up. We've just posted a link, I think some more resources on some of your thinking, Alex. And yeah, thanks Christina for joining us today. I suppose a final question, sort of wrap up from me, which is how should apps and marketers be thinking about this disruption? Is it about just minimizing the damage, do what you can to at least get some activity retargeting going, a layer, and then maybe build it back up? Or is this an opportunity for people to find new ways in and beat the competition? Or just hold off for now? What are the different ways of thinking about this?
I can provide part of an answer, and that is what we're seeing. I don't know how they should be doing. I know what we're seeing right now, and that a lot of shift from budgets from iOS to Android. And I see a lot of advertisers saying essentially, look, I don't know what's going to happen with iOS. My Android data is still there. I want to double down on Android and keep iOS while it's there. And focusing on, there's so many integrations to do with SKAd Network and experiments to run and so on. So most of our partners are just saying, let's continue iOS while it's still there. Let's add a lot of budget on Android, because ultimately that's the platform that they want to leverage the data capabilities on. And we'll revisit in a few months. So while iOS is still going great, and then when it'll stop, at that point a lot of them will figure out if they want to change the entire game on the iOS, or if they want to just minimize or mitigate the risk and call it a day. So I don't know if Christina, that's sort of what you're thinking as well.
I would say I don't have a perfect answer, so I would just go with the do and try. Like really, it's hard to have the golden solution. So I know that our approach will be to.
it'll be a mystery what the approach is, but I think what you wanted to say was that they're going to experiment and they're going to wait out and see what happens on iOS, and experiment until they find a good solution. So that's
perfect place to end. Good. Well, yeah. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Christina. And
thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Great discussion. And yeah, we'll continue the discussion, I guess, in the future. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.